calories. Longer term members who've been with us 5, 6, 7+ years will remember that around that point and earlier on we talked a lot less about calories than we do now, and a lot more about things like JERF, just eat real food, and concentrating on less processed food and so on. And the reason we changed that is a few things. Firstly, we became aware that for some people they just felt that just wasn't something they could do. That they felt that a change in the way they were eating to that, whilst it may work for a fairly high proportion of people, just wasn't something they could do, and therefore they did absolutely nothing. And we came to the realisation that just getting in a calorie deficit is something that we can all do. We might tell ourselves that we can't, we might tell ourselves that it's hard, but out of all the things actually we've ever recommended, it's something that we can just all do. It is just a choice. And also more and more research that came out that questioned some of the things that seemed relatively prevalent in the fitness industry about a decade ago, talking about the impact of hormones and so on, which, whilst still a consideration, is something that, for again, the majority of people just confused the issue. It meant that they weren't doing the important things that would actually get them the results that would get them in the calorie deficit if weight loss was their goal. And people sometimes question us on this approach, why we talk so much about a calorie deficit. And they'll bring up bits of research that they've read. And when I say bits of research, it's often just Facebook posts and links that they'll send us. Because from what I've seen, and I do check the research and I subscribe to various people whose opinion I trust, who are way better at diving into research and studies than I ever will be, all the research ever done that is peer-reviewed, repeatable, really trusted, in which people are put in controlled laboratory circumstances where we measure not just their activity levels in the food they're eating, but their breath rate, their oxygen conversion to carbon dioxide, and various other measures that can really accurately gauge our energy in versus energy out, way more than we'll be able to do in real life. Everyone ever tested loses weight when in a calorie deficit, and the difference in rate of weight loss is relatively minimal. So if in a laboratory circumstance everyone loses weight in a calorie deficit, then actually these seeming variations that we get in real life, or people feeling they're not losing weight when in a deficit, or other questions around that, perhaps are just the inaccuracies of real life. They don't fundamentally mean that the calories in versus calories out model is incorrect, because fundamentally if it is incorrect, we have to rewrite some of the laws of physics. If we can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that a body in which more energy is going out than coming in doesn't then change in some way, doesn't lose weight of whatever that weight may be made up of, then again we have to rewrite the laws of physics. And whilst that could be done, it's again, in the absence of solid proof, I'm willing to just stick with that calories in versus calories out model. And as I mentioned earlier, from my experience over the last several years since we've been talking about it, it is the one approach that everyone can do, and it's the one approach that removes all this confusion. You know, we might try a method, we might try cutting out a certain food group, eating at a certain time of day, stopping eating carbs, etc. And it may or may not work. And it may or may not work depending on whether it puts us in a calorie deficit. So ultimately, let's cut out the middleman, let's cut out the layers of confusion, let's just be aware that calorie deficit is what we need to create. And if we then create it with a more rule-based approach, or by food group elimination or portion control, then that's brilliant. But let's not pretend that that's not what's fundamentally happening underneath. So in short, if we want to lose weight, we need to be having more energy going out than coming in. Our methods of determining that only have limited accuracy, but if it appears that we're not losing weight when in a calorie deficit, again, unless we're going to be the first person ever that can prove that happens, and we're going to rewrite the laws of physics, then let's just assume we're not in a calorie deficit and look what we can do to create that.